Hello and welcome to the Hash. It is, wow, we are looking good today. First of all, we have some amazing shirts going on. I was just, gotta stop.
We don't see each other before the show, everyone.
Wow.
And
It's a big surprise.
Yeah.
We're killing it today. It rules. It's the Hash. We got a lot to talk about. Let's do this thing. Who's starting us off today? Please take it away from me. Jen, Mastercard acquisition, go.
Yeah, so Mastercard has acquired Ciphertrace in a surprise deal that was announced today. Now, this gives the payments company the ability to track over 900 cryptocurrencies through the crypto analytics firm. In a press release, Mastercard president of Cyber and Intelligence, Ajay Bala, said, with the rapid growth of the digital asset ecosystem comes the need to ensure it is trusted and safe. Our aim is to build upon the complementary capabilities of Mastercard and Ciphertrace to do just this. So, Naomi, I have a question for you. The press release points towards security and trust as a critical enabler here. And are firms like Ciphertrace the ones to bring that trust to customers when we talk about mainstream adoption in the crypto space?
No. Let's dig into that. So it's interesting that generally, companies like Mastercard, it's fascinating to look at their privacy security measures because traditionally with credit cards, you have this pull system where if anyone has your credit card number, they can literally just pull money out of your account. You don't have to approve it. Like it's this very weird system and we just kind of trust people with these numbers that we throw out there. So Mastercard and, credit card companies, they are incredible at figuring out fraud. Like I went to this privacy exhibition in San Francisco start of last year, I think. And it was fascinating. Like they will tell, like, is your mouse moving on the screen faster than it usually is? Suggesting that it's a different person using it. Like, where are your eyes looking? They're like accessing cameras. There's like, if you're scrolling through an app, how fast are you doing? How is your phone tilted? Is that the usual tilt? So they're incredible at like deciphering like whether or not there's fraud going on. Now, the difference between that and crypto is that you can't pull money from anyone's account. It is a push system, meaning that you as the individual have to approve every single transaction. That means that you can't have recurring payments. You can't have anything like that. So the fact that Mastercard, with its amazing sleuthing ability, is now saying, well, it's going to help us with trust and security of the system, I think crypto is already pretty secure because it is a push system. This seems more like it's going to be great for governments to keep track of payments. It's going to be great for the IRS to keep track of payments. And that seems to be more in line with what this is. It's going to be great for them, being compliant with AML rules, KYC rules, all of that, and being able to follow money around. I don't see this as protecting consumers, though. It's protecting the status quo, it's protecting other things, but I don't see it as protecting consumers. So that would be my take there, but I'll throw it to you, Will.
Yeah, so in my prior reporting, I've seen that there are always like systems in place for kind of checking out where cryptocurrency has been beforehand. So if you're moving from cryptocurrency to dollars or dollars to cryptocurrency, there's checks in place. Those already exist, and most brokers have it in this instance already. So it's not surprising to see Mastercard do something like that. Just to kind of like jump in the bandwagon with this. What was surprising to me was where it comes into the cycle. Like I wouldn't have thought that this would have come about like for another year or two, but it seems to me that bigger corporations are taking this very seriously, and they don't have an interest in waiting around. Like Ciphertrace just closed on a $2 billion valuation after another series. So they're a pretty large firm at this point, and Mastercard says, hey, we want to get you before this cycle gets any larger. Zach, throw it to you.
Dude, I can't
Was
pass
it
up an opportunity to
Ciphertrace?
fact check you. Jen,
Oh, okay.
let me
Go for it, Zach.
It was chain analysis, all right? It was chain analysis at 2 billion, okay? No way.
Oh,
no,
shoot.
But watch out. Anyway, so Ciphertrace did raise a big
Zach's
round, 27 million, led by a big time investor. And there was just sort of this little bumper crop of like major funding rounds for crypto sleuthing firms earlier this year. And again, it just points to this idea that like the people who use these services, which are basically banks and governments, like it's boom times for them to be able to track illicit and nefarious payments. So you think about seems distant right now, but the Colonial Pipeline, Bitcoin ransomware, all that stuff sort of kickstarted this like hyperdrive of like attention to these firms that, oh, okay, cool. We can turn to these firms to help us understand where these illicit funds are going, and we can sort of mitigate those losses and potentially prevent them down the road. So this to me is sort of a continuation of that moment, right, where all of a sudden everyone is paying attention to these, blockchain sleuthing firms, as we've called them for a number of years. And this acquisition to me is a huge surprise, because I wouldn't have bet that Mastercard would be in the buying end of this deal, and that's super fascinating to me as they think about bringing crypto payments onto their network. Interesting piece of the puzzle. I'm going to toss it back to Naomi for her final thoughts.
Yeah, the Colonial Pipeline tie-in, I would have said that sure, Ciphertrace, companies like that are great if they were this independent contractor that is hired perhaps by law enforcement to track down bad players like that. It's literally been acquired by a credit card company. They're not tracking down the people who were the perpetrators of the Colonial Pipeline hack. They are not law enforcement. They're not going to be contracted to do that stuff. This is all about following individual consumer payments. And, it just, for me, that's not going after the really bad players. That's like using this tool to just kind of get more tax revenue and all of that. That's my cynical take on this. But, Ciphertrace, if it were this independent, as I said, contractor, and that was sort of their area, I'd probably look at them more favorably. But as it turns out, they're just being used by different government agencies to track the purchases of all of these innocent people who are not doing anything wrong. And I just believe in the fundamental right to financial privacy, not mass surveillance of all of our finances. So I can't be happy about this acquisition. But Zach, I'll throw it to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, just last quick thought. I mean, I think we're going to try to find out more information here as to whether or not sort of Ciphertrace will continue servicing the clients that it already services under the Mastercard umbrella, because that could be really interesting as well. All right, Naomi, you have our next story of the day. Take it away.
I have our next story of the day. So some breaking news for you all. You're hearing it first here on CoinDesk TV. Big news coming out of Binance US. Apparently, Binance US has hired Brian Shroder as president of the exchange and also made him a board member. Brian Shroder was formerly a strategist and business development executive at Ant Group, which is an affiliate company of the Chinese internet giant Alibaba, and prior to that at Uber. So he will oversee fundraising, business and corporate development, as well as manage the firm's legal and HR matters. We've all been wondering what's going to be going on with Binance US after the sudden departure of Brian Brooks last month. And so now we finally got that news of where they're headed. So I'm going to throw this straight to the group for your take. Zach, I'll throw it to you to start off with. How do you feel about this move?
Super funny. It definitely does not have the impact of, oh, we hired Brian Brooks to run the shop, right? This is highly reflective of the current market position of Binance being under regulatory scrutiny across the globe. I think it's interesting that, there's, in this announcement, there's still plans for Binance US, the American arm of the largest cryptocurrency exchange by volume, to go public in some capacity, was certainly alluded to in the new president's statement. But just kind of feels like, Binance is weathering some storms. They're finding key leadership to keep the boat afloat, but the fact that they weren't able to get the star power that they got when they announced Brian Brooks last time around, which was really just 4 months ago, if we think about it, suggests that things have turned a bit south for this company as they figure out how to operate in a compliant way in jurisdictions that may be cracking down on what they're able to offer the market. So interesting to me. I don't know. That's my top line take, but I'll toss it to Will. Will, what do you think?
The two things that kind of stand out for me from this headline, kind of coming to a blind here, is it is Ant Group, which obviously very large firm within China. And I don't know much more besides that. I know that they're very embedded in the financial industry there, that they've had a lot of issues with the Chinese government recently. So interesting to get that angle. I'm interested to see further reporting around that angle. But to go back to the Binance part, kind of with you on this, Brian Brooks leaving was a big deal, kind of noted that, regulators have been kind of moving out the door. There's another firm, name escapes me right now, but Giancarlo left that firm after only 4 months in the position. And we're kind of seeing some regulatory swap at the same time that SEC is kind of jumping all over the place. So interesting to see those things kind of be happening at the same time. And then Binance US trying to patch it over. Jen, I'm going to throw it to you.
Yeah, the game show, it's escaping me. The name is escaping me right now, where you have to run through the obstacle course. You keep getting like smacked in the face. That's what Binance feels like to me. They're getting hit with regulatory crackdown from all over the world. FTX is increasing their market share. The show's called Wipeout. Thank you, Control. It feels like Wipeout. FTX is increasing their market share, and this feels like a strange hire to address those two aspects of the business. To Will's point, doing business in China, it really requires the relationships, especially with government. So if they were going to focus their energies there, I can see this as a strategic hire, but I can't understand why they would focus their energies there. But I'll kick it back to you, Naomi.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because the relationship with Binance US with Binance, I think is it's shown to be pretty strong, despite all the rhetoric of them saying that we're completely separate. At the end of the day, CZ is really speaking on behalf of both companies. And so I think it's kind of a smart play to get an executive with experience doing business in Asia, having, understanding the culture there. There's a great quote. So Goodbody has said that knowing how to navigate this business culture while building an increasingly regulated business in the US is a key skill that Shroder will need to exercise. I think that's a key point there. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad play from them. China, Asia is going to be a really important place for them to be building relationships. It's also interesting to note that his brother, Matt Shroder, also works for Binance as a VP heading up the global markets team in Singapore. So lots of connections there, lots of connections to Asia. I just thought that was very interesting. But Zach, I'll throw back to you.
Yeah, just like I remain increasingly confused about the relationship between Binance US and Binance, right? This is the US licensee of Binance technology, and like it seems to be prioritizing a hire that has experience in the Asian crypto markets. And I'm like, I don't really know like how to interpret that or to read what that may mean for the business, but it seems like an odd pick to helm, a company that is trying to ride the tide of crypto interest in the US. So yeah, just a really interesting little signal on where this company is, and again, how it just it's not as exciting as hiring the guy who ran ACC. It's just
True.
not. No offense to Brian Shroder, but it's just not. So I'm just curious to see, what the direction is. Brian Brooks, before he left, had some pretty ambitious goals for how Binance US could stand out from the pack. Curious to see if he carries that torch, or he has his own agenda going forward as to how Binance US is going to stand out. As Jen, I think you're right to allude, FTX US is spending $1 bajillion getting its name out there and sponsoring everyone and everything in the world of sports and beyond. So the opportunity is there, and should this new hire be able to navigate the US market for this brand? I think it's an open question. It's going to be really interesting to watch. That's all I got.
Will, you had your hand up?
Are we taking a break?
I do have a thought.
Will
sorry. Will, go quick.
Really quick. We give like Binance US and Binance's relationship a lot of scrutiny, but FTX has like a similar relationship going on. And I feel like they haven't marketed as strongly like the differentiation between the two products as Binance has. But SBF seems very involved with FTX US just from the outside looking in. So I'm wondering if that kind of plays into this discussion at all. Does it really matter that there's kind of these two different entities, or is it important to market it that way? Just some food for thought before we go into the break.
That is a really good food for thought. That's a good tidbit. That's a good snack on that, folks. We're going to take a break. We're going to do a quick break. When we get back, we're going to go to the world of venture capital. A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, hiring everybody. They got a former CFTC regulator on board as an advisor now. We'll talk about what that means given the current state of crypto regulation in the US. Stick with us. It's The Hash.
When we say we want to reimagine money, It turns out we're going to the heart of the matter. Imagination has always been a key part of what money is. Imagination, in the form of cultural creativity, is also something that the cryptocurrency community has in spades. And to the outsider, that can be a reason to dismiss it as frivolous, as something built on nothing. To dismiss it for these reasons, though, is to ignore that all money is imagined.
Hi there, and welcome back to The Hash. A16Z is beefing up its regulatory chops. Brian Quintenz is the latest former regulator to join the storied venture capital firm. He joins as an advisor on the policy team as A16Z starts deploying a whopping $2.2 billion from its latest crypto fund. I think this is super interesting. I think A16Z sees where things are going. And I think, we saw that in a big way this week with Brian Armstrong from Coinbase taking on the SEC in a tweet storm. And I think, it's important to note here that A16Z is an early and often backer of Coinbase. And I think they see themselves as playing an increasingly large role in shaping these conversations on Capitol Hill. So this hire makes sense in that light and is really interesting to see. I'm going to throw this to Naomi. Do you think that A16Z is going to take the torch for these regulatory discussions in DC? And do you think they're going to serve that conversation well or not?
That's a great question. I think that Brian Quintenz is going to be a fantastic addition to their team regardless. I'm a big fan of the stuff that he said about crypto. He's been, constantly pushing back against the SEC, saying stick to your jurisdiction, buddy, which is really nice to see. I like it when there's conflict in government because they spend time fighting each other and not fighting innocent businesses who are trying to provide value to consumers. So I liked that pushback he was giving them. He's also been very outspoken about the DeFi space, especially in response to Gensler's comments about we're all going to crack down. And then, Quintenz came out and said, who are you protecting in this? There is no central entity in a lot of these companies. So does the purview, is it up to the government to fight this when it's just individuals dealing with individuals? He just brings up some really great points about all of that. So I'm excited to see what value he can bring, especially to a company like A16Z, where they've just got their hand in everything. They are real movers and shakers in the space who are providing a lot of resources to a lot of the crypto space. So I hope that Brian Quintenz can be part of those resources, that it can potentially help some of these companies that are now being scrutinized and who are trying to find their feet in this weird regulatory gray area where the government is just someone had this great tweet today where they're SEC announces a new Schrodinger law where it changes when you look at it, and whether or not it's a security changes, whether or not it's in someone's best interests from the regulator. So I just thought that was very funny and apt. Wanted to add that in there. But yeah, very excited about Brian Quintenz jumping into the crypto space. I think that's a good fit.
I think it's not surprising that A16Z would bring someone like Quintenz on board. You have to think that most of their investments are in crypto firms, and they would need someone who is able to navigate the field. I think so. I know we talk about the opaqueness when it comes to the regulatory. What's the word I'm looking for? When it comes to regulation, the regulatory landscape. I always get stuck on what to say after regulatory. When it comes to the regulatory landscape, there's a lot of opaqueness. But as a journalist, it's really exciting to watch the law change. I think the law has stayed very much the same for a very, very long time, especially when it comes to securities, and seeing this battle kind of take place in front of our eyes is really exciting. And it will be exciting to see if people like Quintenz and positions like these can make the change we need to see innovation continue to happen. So I think this is just great news all around, but I'll pass it down to Will.
Yeah, interesting to me is that A16Z is doing this, and it makes total sense. I was thinking the other day, who has more on the line than someone like A16Z, which right now has a $2 billion fund for distributing capital that they've got. Don't fact check me that yet, Zach, but you can fact check me in a second. But they have a huge fund dedicated to cryptocurrency companies and forthcoming investments in the cryptocurrency space. The people who put money in A16Z's hands to be able to do that have a vested interest in cryptocurrency being around in 5 or 10 years. Those companies that put that money into A16Z's hands, I have a good feeling that they know people even higher up than A16Z does, and they have an interest in kind of pushing that through like the lobbying space. So I think that's kind of interesting to see the feedback cycle here, right? We have regulators moving into the VC land, VCs putting money into entrepreneurs' hands, entrepreneurs putting out new products that customers want. And we're kind of seeing like that natural cycle go along. I think it's also interesting to see how many regulators are just fascinated by the crypto space. They obviously can't get enough of it. Brian Brooks went right into the crypto space, even though he just left Binance US. Giancarlo went right into the crypto space, even though he just left that position. And now you have Quintenz coming into this space as well. Everyone is really, really interested in the space, regardless of Gary Gensler and other people who are looking at the space right now with a little more critical eye. There's more interest than ever from people who are in regulatory spots or in bigger positions. I mean, they could go to Goldman Sachs or they could go to the JP Morgans of the world, and they're choosing not to.
Yeah, really interesting. Fact checked. Correct, Will. You got that. You nailed that one. So good work. Shout out the wins as well. But yeah, I mean, they're assembling a bit of a dream team, right? So they got Katie Haun, who's a former high up in DC. They got Bill Hinman, who was formerly with the SEC, and now they're adding Quintenz to the roster. And I think you're right. I mean, they have more capital to invest, but they've also, this is their third crypto fund, right? They have major bags to protect. If their bags suddenly become questionable and whether or not people can access those assets that they're heavily invested in, that's going to be a big problem for A16Z, its limited partners, and their well-connected friends. So for them to be staffing up on the regulatory side seems to make sense. And if it's ultimately a showdown between SEC and A16Z, man, that's going to be interesting to watch.
I'll be front row for that show.
Major bag alert. But yeah, Naomi, I saw your hand up. I want to give you the last word.
Yeah, I just wonder whether we're going to see on the horizon a battle play out between the CFTC and the SEC, because you had the SEC come in strong and they came in and said, everything is a security, everything is our jurisdiction. Meanwhile, all these other agencies are kind of trying to catch their breath. They're like, well, maybe this is our jurisdiction too, but SEC has really put in the groundwork. They've laid this foundation and they're going after companies. So I wonder whether adding Brian Quintenz with his experience at the CFTC is going to, whether it's like an omen of this battle to come. We know that they've been setting up joint regulatory boards between different agencies, but it seems like the SEC is still running the show no matter what other organizations they put in these government oversight committees. It is very interesting. If that happens, I'm not sure whether CFTC will be any better for companies than SEC regulations, especially now that Brian Quintenz is no longer at the helm there, no longer one of the commissioners there. So we'll have to see what happens there, but it could be an interesting battle playing out over jurisdiction. But let's change track. Will, what have we got next?
Zach, you have a final thought?
I'm just seeing this in our news channel. Another CFTC commissioner, Dan Berkowitz, who took a more hardline stance on DeFi, is planning to leave the agency soon. So a lot of interesting activities in the regulatory sphere. Okay, just wanted to get that in. That's the latest from the CoinDesk Slack, the news channel. It's popping. It's always popping. We got a lot of breaking news today. All right, Will, I'm going to give it back to you. Take it away.
That's right. Time to talk about Bitmain. So Bitmain is the largest Bitcoin mining manufacturer, and they're sending 56,000 machines to the USA of Georgia under a new deal. That's $62 million for a 200 megawatt facility in that state. Of course, this comes after months and months and months of trial and error of trying to get machines over to different parts of the world. Currently, Bitmain and a lot of other Chinese miners have just stockpiled these machines in China, and they've just been sitting on racks waiting to be deployed around the world. There's been a few locations that have seen machines being deployed to. It's like Kazakhstan or Texas or Quebec. But for the most part, a lot of the machines that were pulled off the racks in China in May and June have just kind of sat in warehouses. Some Chinese miners have been able to plug back in if they're kind of a smaller scale or medium scale. David Pan had a great article about that a few weeks ago on CoinDesk. Be sure to check that out. But for the most part, these industrial sized miners who have just huge farms, just tons of megawatts of power, they've had to just kind of sit and wait and see what come up to play. So now that Bitmain has this new facility, I think there's also a few other facilities that Bitmain is looking at. One in Texas comes top of mind currently. But we're going to see more of these miners coming to the US, which of course is bringing a whole new industry to the US and brings up a ton of questions about the US's involvement in the proof of work Bitcoin mining, which of course is like this huge bag, like ESG questions, environmental stuff is all tied up in that. Zach, I'm going to throw this story to you. When you see this big headline, 56,000 machines in Georgia, what's your thought?
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, comes fresh on the heels of a Blockstream announcement with a major Australian asset manager. They're gonna test out a green energy mining facility also in the U.S. So momentum around U.S. Bitcoin mining is not waning. I'll say that much. It's interesting to see that U.S. really seems to be sort of taking the pole position that that China gave away when it really cracked down on the industry a few months ago. So, whether it's Georgia, whether it's upstate New York, whether it's Texas, whether it's the Pacific Northwest, there's a ton of activity going on in Bitcoin mining in the U.S. And I think this just adds to that story. And I think the thing that you mentioned about sort of ESG and whether or not U.S. businesses can do this in a responsible manner is going to be a really interesting question, right? A lot of these firms are publicly traded. A lot of these firms have major and powerful shareholders. So whether they can sort of thread the needle of keeping the Bitcoin network going strong while also alleviating some of the environmental concerns, I think that'll be the interesting question should the U.S. continue to increase its share of Bitcoin hash rate. So I'll toss that to Jen.
I just have a question for you, Will. Is there any concern on the regulatory front? I know we saw a regulatory crackdown in China. We saw a small mention of miners in the infrastructure bill. With all of these machines coming to the States, like is this a concern that is on the radar?
I think you have to kind of think about how the U.S. government works and how it's kind of broken across different tiers. So like the local, the state, and then the federal level. And there's checks and balances between all of those. So yes, there could be some issues depending on like where you're at. So for example, in 2017 bull market, the local communities in Seattle and that area were not super happy to see all these Bitcoin miners plug in because they were driving up electricity rates. And so they passed some rules and regulations in those local areas and increase the cost for those Bitcoin miners to operate. And those Bitcoin miners left. On a larger federal scale, it's looking right now from just basically the conversation on the Senate floor when that bill is passed that Bitcoin miners will not be affected very much by the infrastructure bill, if at all. They kind of see Bitcoin miners as a neutral technology, not as brokers. The IRS doesn't see them as brokers and the Treasury does not see them as brokers. And then on the state level, it's really just depends on where you're at. New York State has very hostile cryptocurrency regulation across the board, not just for Bitcoin mining, but also just for like anything with their really infamous New York Act there. But other states are competing for Bitcoin miners and for other cryptocurrency industries in general. Kentucky passed some legislation to give like tax breaks. Texas has been very aggressive in courting Bitcoin miners, with Greg Abbott even speaking at a Bitmain conference a few months ago, asking Chinese miners to come to the state. So I think like the answer is it depends on where you are and who you're dealing with. But for the most part, the U.S. remains like very welcoming to any sort of cryptocurrency industry that provides jobs for the most part. I think the contention is where you get to moving money around on like exchanges and the things you're seeing with the SEC right now.
All right.
But that's all my thoughts.
All right. Well, that was some good thoughts, man. You're killing it today.
Those are great
Jen,
thoughts.
you were killing it today. Naomi also killing it today. Everyone killing it today.
Zach, you were
stuff,
killing
folks.
it today.
We killed it with
Thanks,
our
Naomi.
outfits.
Appreciate
And
you.
Zach, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
I need to
good stuff.
get some tie-dye.
We'll get you
Yeah, tie-dye hash shirt.
Let's get something in the mail for
the
Will.
hash, and then it's just tie-dye.
It's just tie-dye.
I'm
A
into
picture
it.
of Zach's
Can someone
face.
whip that up? Can someone make that happen?
Control.
Oh my goodness. Control just said that was stupid. Oh my goodness. Shut it down.
Wow.
All right. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I'm putting our director on blast. That's the end of the show today. This is The Hash. It's on CoinDesk TV. It's really great. We'll be back again tomorrow. Stick with us on CoinDesk throughout the day for all sorts of good news and bad. And CoinDesk TV will be back to you at 3 p.m. Eastern with All About Bitcoin. Until we meet again, I am Zach Seward, and we think you're special. And thanks for watching.